But first, we're following the 7th mass shooting in the U.S. this month, this time at a Walmart in Chesapeake, Virginia. Police confirm a store manager opened fire Tuesday night, killing 6 people, including a 16-year-old boy. 7 others were injured. Authorities say it appears the gunman died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. An employee inside described the moment the horror began.
It's by the grace of God that a bullet missed me. Not gonna lie, I literally looked at him. I saw the smoke leaving the gun, and I literally watched bodies drop.
For more on this, let's bring in CBS News Chief National Affairs and Justice Correspondent Jeff Pegues, who's on the scene there in Chesapeake. Jeff, what have we learned from authorities and employees of that Walmart about the timeline of the attack?
Well, less than 24 hours ago is when all of this unfolded. The first calls to 911 came in at about 10:12, and then within 4 minutes, we're told officers breached the Walmart. They went in, which is really the standard protocol here when you have an active shooter situation. They went in, they were looking for the fatalities, they were looking for the wounded, and they were looking to neutralize the gunman as well. But by the time they got to him, according to investigators, he'd suffered a self-inflicted gunshot wound. But it was a horrible scene inside that store. To think this is the holiday season. You had holiday shoppers in there, and all of a sudden, all of it turned to horror with this store employee turning that gun not only on his co-workers, but also on some of the people in the store, the customers in the store. According to police, there were about 50 people in the store when all of this unfolded.
And Jeff, the alleged gunman has been identified, as you pointed out, as an overnight manager. Walmart says he started working for the company in 2010. Do we have any new information about him or why, a possible motive?
Well, 31 years old, but in terms of a possible motive, that's what investigators are still looking for. You still have a very active scene here. So they're going to be looking for that kind of evidence. They're going to be searching his electronic devices, whether he used a computer. They'll be looking at that as well. You know, this was obviously a disgruntled employee, but being a disgruntled employee doesn't always lead to this kind of incident. So they're going to try and look at his background, try to pinpoint exactly what it may have been that caused him to lash out last night on his coworkers as people were in this store. It seemed to me, just based on what we're hearing, he didn't appear to be a troubled employee, according to some of the reports that we're getting. And we talked to some of the victims' family members. One of them told us that, they train you to be prepared if someone comes into the store with a gun, but you're not prepared, this person said, if you have an employee who is armed and turns that gun on fellow coworkers. And so it was a really chilling scene in there, and investigators are still trying to figure out the motive.
Jeff, our colleagues Vladimir Duthiers and Elaine Quijano spoke to Virginia State Senator Lily Louise Lucas. She represents that Chesapeake area. She called on her fellow legislators to take action to prevent gun violence. Take a listen.
As far as I'm concerned, these thoughts and prayers just don't go far enough for me. And until the legislature gets the will to come up with some common sense gun prevention measures, then they're just giving it lip service.
Let's contrast that with Virginia's Republican Governor Glenn Youngkin. He says now is not the time to be discussing gun legislation. This comes after 3 University of Virginia football players were fatally shot earlier this month. What is the reaction there on the ground where you're at?
Omar, I feel like I've heard this debate over and over and over again. And I'm sure if you talk to family members of victims, they're going to say the same thing. You hear the same sort of debates after these shootings, but then nothing ever changes. We were looking at some statistics, and what we found is that over the last 7 days, there have been 7 mass shootings in this country. Think about those numbers. It is unusual to see those kinds of numbers anywhere else on this earth. And so there are a lot of people who say they want gun control. Other people say this is a mental health issue. Well, these debates continue. And what we see in this community right now, I went to the house of one of the Tanika Johnson, who was shot and killed, 22 years old. I went to her house. The first thing I noticed were her family members, each and every one of them. Their eyes were bloodshot red. You could tell that they had been grieving, you know. And so you are seeing that with victims' family members across this area because of what happened last night. Of course, they were preparing for the holiday season. We're on the eve of Thanksgiving here. But you have this horror unfolding inside this Walmart behind me.
A horrible, horrible story there, and still a lot of questions unanswered. Jeff Pegues, thank you.